Are EV drivers in a demographic that your property wants? Welcome back to another episode of EV Charging Minute. I'm Tony Booth, founder of Stay in Charge, the host and gracious sponsor of this podcast, where we try to come together every week to share a little bit of knowledge and understanding of EV charging in the commercial industries, commercial real estate industries. So today we want to talk about EV driver demographics and get an understanding of who they are, what they look for, what they like, and see if it's what fits your property or something that your property is trying to look at or trying to attract, right? So I'm sure most of you are familiar when we talk about demographics, and if you're talking to a marketing person, we're going to get into like personas and, right? Who are these people? What are their habits? What are the things they like? And how do we attract them, right? Because that's what's important here. Two sides of this that we feel is important to get across today is one is I want you to get an understanding of what the demographic is so that you can obviously take a look at your property and say, is that a group that's coming to my property today? Are they my customers, clients, residents today? Are they ones that we want to attract? Or are they ones that we want in the future? Or maybe this demographic doesn't even fit my property yet. And again, remember, that's what we're here for. We're here to educate, not just sell you a charger. So that's why it's important to understand this demographic and who they are. So that's what we're going to talk about today. As you know, if you're familiar with demographics whatsoever, it's really about, the age and generation, their income, spending habits, things like that. What they, how they travel, what they travel to, what they like when they're out on the road, all those things like that. And a little bit of whether it matters to you. Okay. So starting out, like all demographics, what are the age and kind of the generations that are EV drivers? So the largest group that you'll find that are driving EVs today that have already taken the plunge, as we call them, the early adopters, the majority of them are going to be millennials, right? The millennials, and they're typically, you'll find that they're tech savvy, college educated, people that's what they're interested in. So they jumped in, they bought the EVs. Obviously, that's where the majority is in that millennial age. Then they're followed closely by the Gen X group, right? Which is that's your 40 and up kind of range of people, somewhere around there. Don't quote me on the Gen X versus millennials. But basically, you can look that up. Like, you can look it up to be sure. I didn't do that. I know baby boomers, right? They're up there in the 60 plus range. So wherever those people lie, right? Like, I don't know the exact dates, but millennials are the highest, followed by the Gen X. And then, as I mentioned, the baby boomers, right? They're starting to go more and more. They're growing more and more into this. And not to count out the younger generations, because as the prices come down, you'll see more of them. So when it comes to age and the generation, it's a pretty wide group, right? So what we try to remind everybody, when you're looking at it from an age standpoint, you really can't count anybody out. Because if you said, oh, well, we're more, senior place, like we're one of those hotels, or we're a retail establishment that more senior people come to, well, they're one of the quicker growing groups, because they all want to, they're getting that retirement car. There's a lot of safety features involved and things like that. So they're moving into that as well. So it's a very wide range of age groups that get into EV charging. And the one thing in common with all of them is they value that ability to charge. As we've talked about many times, the bulk of charging is actually going to occur at home. In fact, they figure, long-term about 80% of it. But anytime somebody gets on the road, they're going to need to charge. So that hits all your convenience stores on the highways and your hotels. But also when you get into your urban and kind of more congested settings where there's apartment complexes, condo complexes, places like that are not going to have charging either. So that's where those people are going to be looking for somewhere to charge. So they all value charging. So your demographics from an age standpoint obviously is a wide range, but most of those are going to be in your millennials. So your millennials have started a family, have some kids, and then they're growing up into that age. The next thing we want to take a look at is the kind of their income slash spending habits. Okay. So the majority of EV drivers, which, you know, is obvious when you look at the cost of the vehicles, but they're in that mid to upper level income earners. So typically you'll see that they're going to earn, 75,000 or more. Combine that as a family income of 150 plus, which when you really look at the price of EVs until they get further down, it makes sense, right? It's kind of obvious, right? Like kind of be Captain Obvious here, but they obviously need to have a little bit higher income to be able to afford to pay the upfront cost of the car, even though a lot of it levels out when you consider gas and maintenance. It's still you got to pay for it up front. So that you're going to find they're typically higher income individuals. That will continue to expand as the resale market grows. Like right now, there's not a big resale, used car market, but that will grow. And as it does, you'll see more of these people come on board. That you'll see that income level come down. Now, as far as their spending habits, because they are in that upper level of income earners, they tend to have a little bit higher disposable income, which means they will typically spend a little more. So the studies that if you look up some real detailed studies, you'll find that EV drivers are going to be the ones that are more likely to sit in your restaurant and have a bite to eat versus going to a fast food stop, or they're willing to spend a little bit more to stay at a place that has chargers. When they're in a store, uh, what we actually find when they're in the store, they tend to spend more money on products that are higher end, right? It may not be that they buy more, like if they're in the store with their family and they've got a couple, two kids and a husband and wife and two kids, they buy for the four people, right? The same as everybody else. But the one thing you do find is they're typically a little bit more eco-conscious. So they kind of pay a little bit more attention to what they buy. So those things might be a little bit more high end. They might be looking for stuff that's a little bit more high end and shop that aisle of your convenience store. So keep that in mind. But detailed studies that have been done show that they spend on average 13% more than the same driver in a regular vehicle. So that is where their spending habits are and their income. Remember, so they're typically the higher income earners, and they tend to spend a little bit more than your other drivers. Next piece on demographics that we look into because it matters here is their travel habits, right? Because obviously we do a lot in hospitality, which is a huge place for EV charging. But this also plays into, remember, this also plays into your other retail restaurants, your other places where people are along the way. They need this because what we find is EV drivers often tend to like road trips. It's really kind of funny, and I've seen this phenomenon for several years now. EV drivers really get into their road trips and they like to get out. They like to spend time. Uh, they'd like to do weekend getaways. I don't know if that's just an overall trend of the younger millennials, but it's definitely a trend in the EVs. They love their 3-day weekends. They like their fringe vacations. They tend to favor experiences, right? They tend to want to go to the places with hiking, bike riding, things like that. So keep that in mind as you're looking at, does that demographic fit your location? Because it really is, maybe it's because you wrap up the eco-consciousness of the EV driver and then those kind of things together, but they do tend to like those kind of hiking trips and things like that. So keep that in mind when you're looking. These people do like the road trips. So think about people that like road trips when you're picturing how to reach out and market to that demographic. And you will find that 76% of them will choose locations with EV charging. So that's on the travel side. The next little tidbit of demographics that I like to discuss and look at with people is their habits during the day, because this is where it applies to your urban settings, your city dwellers, things like that. This doesn't really impact like in a rural setting, because in the rural setting, most of those people are going to have home charging, right? If you look at your area, your market area, and if the majority of people have off-street parking, they're going to be able to charge their vehicle at home. But as you move in more to your center core, your city cores, right? As you get closer to those higher density, population density areas, then you have less of that ability for off-street parking, and you run into more people that are going to look for charging at other locations during the day. Because if you live in an apartment complex, you may find that they may not have charging, or if they do, it may be limited. Maybe there's a half a dozen chargers, but there's 20 people that drive EVs. So in those locations, in those regional areas, those demographics now expand, because you're going to be looking at, as that EV driver, I'm going to be somebody who's looking at, can I charge while I shop? Can I charge while I'm at the gym? Can I charge somewhere nearby while I'm at work, or even at my work, right? So that might be a perk that I get at my work location. Or if I'm a real estate owner and I own a property with a commercial, kind of one of those commercial campuses, right, where I have office complexes and maybe some retail, I might look at saying, well, look, if I put in EV chargers, I've got all these people coming every day that I could generate some revenue around that. So that demographic, you need to look at. Those people are going to be looking at the ABCs of charging, right? The always be charging. If I can't charge at home, then I want to see. I'm going to make choices of where I go based on, can I grab a little charge here, right? If I gotta commute to work every day and I'm burning off 30, 40 miles of battery on the way there, 30, 40 miles on the way back, but I'm also going to stop somewhere and work out, stop somewhere, grab a bite to eat. I know at least twice a week I'm going to do some shopping for an hour or two. You add all that up, I could end up getting 15, 20 hours of charging a week by plugging in at the places I frequent. If I can do that, I don't really have to go to a fast charger, right? So that whole concept of me wasting time somewhere, I don't have to. So keep that in mind when you're reviewing the demographics and comparing it to your property, because that's a big deal. And you can attract a lot more people like that. So when it comes to that little urban settings, the urban core and city settings, the reaching out into suburban, not quite, you got to watch that fringe. You get too suburban, it's too spread out, you won't have as much of that demographic. But that group you need to look at and say, okay, are these people that might spend 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours a week at my property? If so, EV charging is going to help you attract them. Okay, so that's really the summary of it there. Does any of that sound like your demographic or someone that you want to attract? So if you do, you better have some EV charging. So I want to wrap it up for you just as a quick wrap up, okay? The biggest, largest group age-wise are the millennials. Income bracket-wise, they're the 75K and up earners, so they tend to be mid to upper level income, and all of them tend to, or the majority, 76% or more, state that EV charging availability is a core influencer on decisions of where they frequent, whether that's during travel or just on the day going to shop. So keep that all in mind as you look at all this. And then a couple things I want to share closing here. These are things that we found. that aren't really easy to locate, easy to get from a survey, but we know it from where they come to our properties and with our host. Uh, EV drivers tend to be very loyal. So once they've found a place, they found that there's chargers that are working, they're coming back. They don't tend to vary much. So they're coming back. They're very often repeat customers. It's kind of crazy what we see sometimes, especially at some of our hotels where people are coming back, constantly. We've also learned that they will go out of their way for charging. So we've talked to people that will tell us they stay 10 minutes away from where they would typically stay because it has charging, or they'll drive 5 minutes out of the way, 10 minutes out of the way to go to a shopping center that has charging, and even change their preferred chain for charging. So that's how important charging can be. And then one other thing that's really cool about this community right now is they share information like crazy. They're very into communities. They're into being on their little groups, and they all get on and they share their information. Uh, One of the biggest things that leads to that is you've heard of plug share. Well, plug share started as a crowdsourced solution, right? So that's how much they want to share information. And even a little side note for us, right? Stay in Charge, our directory, is the number one leading resource for hotels with EV charging. We show up number one in search results anywhere in the United States for that, and we actually capture about 80 to 90% of that search traffic comes to our website. We did not advertise, we did not do anything other than go into some of the different groups and tell some people 3 years ago, hey, if you're looking for hotels with EV charging, here's a great place. So that's how much they share this, and they drive traffic to a site. So think of what that can do for your commercial real estate property, right? If you are the one in your little community that puts the chargers in that allows these people to have a place to charge, they're all going to tell their friends and colleagues and their other EV drivers, like, hey, if you're looking for a great gym, go down here because they've got chargers as well. So that's the demographics of EV drivers. If it's something that you want to attract, then you better get moving on some EV charging, and we are here to help. So reach out to us anytime you want. My team is standing by to give you the knowledge. And thank you for joining us, and I hope that you got some good information today and learned more about EV charging. See you next week.